Our next video in our accessibility series is going to look at clear language and chunking, which are concepts that you may well be familiar with, but they do play a role in accessibility. So we want to make sure that we mention them, talk about them in the context of accessibility at least. Clear language is just referring to writing that's straightforward, concise, easy to understand. Sometimes people say plain language. We're trying to avoid jargon, complex grammar, unnecessary words, and filler, just to make sure that everybody, regardless of reading level, background, disability, whatever it is, can understand the content. And sometimes this one can be a little bit controversial because people tend to think, well, the course requires a certain level of these things, or this is a high level course, so they should be able to understand that. And that makes sense, and we will get into that a little bit more towards the end of this video. This is more referring to things for things like directions and content of that sort. We want to try to make things as straightforward and clear as possible. We have to consider that we have students that maybe have cognitive disabilities where just understanding a set of directions can be difficult. So if the directions are hard, by the time they get to the actual material, they put all of their effort and energy, or a lot of their effort and energy, into understanding even what they're supposed to do, and then it just makes everything that much worse. And again, that's where some of that controversy comes in. Well, if they can't understand the directions, how can they understand the content? It's not that they can't, it's just about making it as accessible as possible and not wasting all my cognitive energy on figuring something out, and take that energy instead and put it towards actually learning the material. Consider non-native English speakers, people using screen readers. There's a lot of different things that come into play with making sure you're using clear language. So as an example, and this one is punched up a little bit just to kind of clearly get the point across, but students are hereby advised that the submission of the aforementioned assignment shall be expected no later than the third day of the subsequent week. I don't think a lot of people would go through and make things that were quite that detailed, but much easier way to say it, please turn in the assignment by Wednesday of next week. Much more clear and to the point. And again, that's kind of an elaborate example. But if you look through, you might find that some of your materials do have directions that are a little more detailed and could be more to the point. Again, this isn't going to interact or cause problems with screen readers or issues for people that have visibility or mobility issues. This is just good practice for everybody. You don't have a student that could take that confusing version and work through it very easily. Again, no sense in adding an extra step that doesn't need to be there when we could make it a little bit easier on them up front. So again, not a lot of Canvas example, but keep sentences short and direct, avoid jargon and acronyms if you can, write in your active voice, try to keep things within common and familiar words, break information that might be complex down into steps or into chunks. So chunking, again, a word you're probably familiar with, concept you're probably familiar with. We're just talking about taking larger pieces of information and breaking them down into smaller, more manageable sections. We're trying to avoid the dreaded wall of text. Obviously, there are situations where we might have bigger chunks of text, and that's okay. We just want to try to avoid those where possible. So using headings like we talked about before in our structure, H1, H2s, H3s, making sure that we have appropriate amount of spacing, including visuals where possible, use lists, just to try to make the content a little more approachable. Important to consider students, especially students with cognitive disabilities. When it's hard to find a specific piece of information that they may need, and instead we're sifting through paragraph after paragraph, we're not sure if they don't understand because they don't understand the content, or do they not understand because they're just having trouble finding what they're supposed to be doing. So keeping things in those smaller chunks just helps them to understand and retain information more easily. And then from a navigation standpoint, it's easier just to try to skim through again and find the stuff that we're looking for when it's not buried in that wall of text. So example, unchunked, you can see I won't read that, but just going through and talking about what we're going to do in that module. Again, you could read through it. It's not that it's terribly complicated, but when I look at the one on the right, the chunked accessible version, we have a clear heading of what we're going to learn, and we break it down into basic points. It's just kind of easier to skim through and easier to retain what it is we need to remember or think about as we move through a module, because it's been outlined for us clearly in a way that's easy to understand. So to summarize with our do's and don'ts, making sure we're breaking things down into sections and using headings, making sure we're allowing for appropriate space between paragraphs and sections so we're not just jamming content together, using lists, visual icons when we can. If you notice this course, I try to include those visuals, not because I don't think people can read do and don't, but it just gives you another visual reminder, and then make sure we use that same concept when we create our module structures. Even don't put too much content into a section of a module. Try to break it down by topic so it's easier to go back through and find. Again, we're trying to avoid that large wall of text. Don't want to hide any important information. Making sure we're breaking stuff down into individual pages within modules and not using just visuals to separate. We want to make sure we use that structure of those headings as well.